their contributions to society. And Mr. Robbert F has continued that tradition with his work on environmental issues, now standing up for parents and children in this fight against the drug companies and they're pushing these vaccines. I know Mr. King doesn't know this, but I have special respect for him because years ago I read his reports on autism. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I spent weeks, close to a month, reading those two reports again and again, taking notes, following for the references. So I have a deep appreciation for what a great researcher Mr. Kennedy is. That's why I feel sorry for anyone who wants to be on the stage with Mr. Kennedy and debate him. That's why they're always afraid. They always don't show up or leave because they're afraid. The man is brilliant, he has a heart, he is committed, and he's also reaffirmed for me that there is forces of good in this world, and they embody Robbert Kennedy.
I just did a short interview in the hallway, and one of the reporter asked me how I got into this issue, and he said, you know, a lot of people say that you are a very good environmentalist, but when you took on vaccines, you went too far. And, you know, and he said, how did that happen to you? And I said, can you hear me? He said, how did that happen to you? And I said, well, I read too much science, and I couldn't unlearn it. And that's exactly what happened. I got dragged kicking and screaming into this controversy. I was representing Waterkeeper and a lot of the other waterkeepers around the country, the individual ones around North America. Around 2004, 2005, in a series of about 30 to 40 lawsuits at different times against cement kilns and coal-burning power plants for discharging mercury. And the mercury was coming down and precipitating out of the clouds with the rain and coming into our fish. And FDA that the year in 2004 had done a study that showed that every freshwater fish in America now had advisories, had dangerous levels of mercury in its flesh. And many of the ocean-going fishes that I grew up with loving to eat, like swordfish and tuna, were now high levels of mercury. And at that time, the CDC had published a report that said 1 out of every 6 American women had dangerous levels of mercury in her cord blood, in her womb. And that it was causing a grim inventory of diseases, including blindness, mental retardation, heart, liver, kidney disease, all well documented, and autism, because it was coming from fish. And so I was suing these power plants, and we were uniquely focused on mercury discharges. And I was speaking about mercury all over the country, and wherever I went, there were large crowds who were interested in it, but there were always these women who would sit in the front row. And they would come up to me afterwards, and they were very presentable. They were people who were, oftentimes they were professionals, they were doctors, pharmacists, lawyers, psychologists, scientists. And they would come up to me afterwards and they would say, in a little bit of a scolding way, if you're genuinely interested in mercury exposure to our children, you need to listen and look at the vaccines. This was an area that I was out of my wheelhouse. It was an area that I didn't want to get into. My family has been involved for generations in public health and mental health issues, and so I grew up with it. I grew up with Special Olympics, and I really wanted to spend my life doing water and energy and environmental issues, and I didn't want to get into this. But a woman named Sarah Bridges, who some of you may know, was a psychologist from Minnesota, came to my house one summer, I think the summer of 2005, in Hyannisport. brought a huge pile of scientific studies, of published studies, peer-reviewed studies, and she put them on my front doorstep. And she said her son had gotten autism from a vaccine, and the vaccine court, his name was Porter Bridges, he was one of the first children who was awarded by the vaccine court for autism. This is before they realized they had to not do that anymore. But he had gotten a $20 million lifetime settlement, and today he's still in autism schools, and he's still receiving money from HHS, from the trust fund. And she brought me all of these studies, and she said, I'm not going to leave here until you read them. And, you know, I'm accustomed to reading science. I wanted to be a scientist when I was a kid, and that's how I kind of ended up in this racket that I'm in. And I've bought over 500 successful legal actions in my career. Almost all of them involve some kind of scientific controversy. And if I weren't comfortable reading science, I would not be very successful in my job. I ended up sitting down and reading that science, and then after that reading a lot more. And one of the first things that struck me, even 3 or 4 studies into it, was the huge delta between what the public health authorities and the pharmaceutical companies were telling Americans about vaccine safety and about particularly thimerosal safety, and what the actual science said. And so I did what I do with all of my cases. I have, because of my name and my contacts, I have access to the highest levels of government, and my family has a long history with public health authorities in this country. As many of you know, the Kennedy Krieger Institute is the primary institute which is in NIH for studying mental health in this country. My family has deep connections with all of the regulatory agencies, so I'm able to call people like, or at least I was, Francis Collins and Tony Fauci, and I talked to Paul Offit, and I talked to Marie McCormick, and I talked to Kathleen Stratton from IOM, and I asked them about what I was reading in the science. And they were unable to make any kind of coherent sense. I'll tell you one of the things I had a discussion with Paul Offit that really changed my mind about this issue. And this is what the funny thing, it's not all the things that I was reading that were saying they were wrong. It was when they lied to me that made me think they don't have an answer for this, and they know it. And the particular issue was, for many years, Eli Lilly had been saying about thimerosal that it's safe, it's mercury. Okay, and this is what I said to Paul Offit. I said, you are telling people, and CDC is telling women, do not eat tuna fish when you're pregnant. How can you be injecting them with mercury at the same time? How could that possibly be okay? It's just an obvious common sense question. And he said, well, because there's 2 kinds of mercury. There's good mercury and there's bad mercury. So his argument really wasn't with me, it was with the, it was with the elemental tables. So I said to him, and I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, ethylmercury in thimerosal is quickly excreted by the body, so it's not resident in the body long enough to do harm. And actually, there was a scientific study, and Eli Lilly had been saying this since 1934, since the patent thimerosal. And they'd been saying that, and they had no scientific basis for it. But around 2002, there was a study by a guy called Picciero, which was like a gift from heaven to them. Because Picciero said he injected children, he gave children tuna fish sandwiches. He gave another group of children a shot of thimerosal. Kids who ate the tuna fish sandwich and had the methylmercury in them, mercury has a half-life in their blood of 54 days. But the children who got injected with thimerosal, the mercury was gone within a week. He published that study, and it seemed to confirm everything that Eli Lilly and the industry had been saying for all those years. That mercury is safe, and the ethyl mercury is safe in the vaccine. To this day, CDC has it on their website. It's a lie. We're going to sue them for that. Something called the Data Quality Act that says that agencies, even federal agencies like CDC, are not allowed to lie on their website. When Picciero wrote this study, I think it was in Pediatrics that was published, Boyd Haley, who is the leading authority on mercury in this country, is the chairman of the chemistry department at University of Kentucky, wrote them a letter and he said, yeah, well, where did the mercury go? It left the blood. But you actually looked for it in the fecal material and you couldn't find it. You looked for it in the sweat and you couldn't find it. You looked for it in the hair and you couldn't find it. You looked for it in the urine and you couldn't find it. Oh, where did it go? A couple of years later, NIH asked that same question, and they asked a scientist at the University of Washington to do the studies, and Thomas Burbacker. And Thomas Burbacker did animal studies, which is what they should have done years ago.
Yes, they should have.
And he gave a bunch of macaque monkeys, he gave some of them tuna fish sandwiches, and he gave the other ones the ethyl mercury injections and thimerosal, the same doses that people get the vaccine. And then he sacrificed the monkeys to see what had happened to it. And what he found was that the reason it was leaving the blood was because it crossed the blood-brain barrier much quicker than methyl mercury. And it was going into the brain. Once in the brain, it metabolized organic mercury, which is the most toxic kind, and then it would stay in the brain. We now know that it stays in the brain in one study for 27 years, causing inflammation, and it caused a lot of inflammation. And so I said to Paul Offit, when he said, well, it leaves the blood very quickly, I said, how do you know that? And he said, well, the Picciero study. And I said, well, what about the Burbacker study? It showed that it was going into the brain. And there was dead silence on the phone, and I have this recorded, but by that time, I knew they were all lying to me. Offit was very charming. He told me, the reason I got into public health is because your father, and all these very complimentary things to me. I love your environmental work. So, I'm susceptible to flattery, and I was inclined to like him. But I knew he was lying. And he said to me, I said to him, how do you explain that, Paul? And he said, he was dead silent, and then he said, well, it's not a single study, it's an entire mosaic of studies.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what are they? Can you send them to me? And he said, yeah, I'll send them to you. And I've been waiting now, that's 15 years. And we know they don't have the science. And we have on our website 1,400 studies that show that, people are getting injured from vaccines. They're getting injured because of the adjuvants, the mercury and the aluminum. And I'll just tell you a little bit about why they add adjuvants in the vaccine. It's something that we discovered about the mercury. Lynn Redwood and Mark Hyman and I went and met with the top officials at NIH, and we showed them, we said, look, I wrote the book on the mercury in the vaccine, so I thought, once people see this, I have 1,400 references in that book, 400 studies. And I just thought, people must not understand how bad this stuff is, or they wouldn't leave it in the vaccine. So I wanted to put it all in one place and put it in easy to read, accessible English. And I thought, once I publish that book, then this will be over, and I'll be able to go back to Waterkeeper and do what I want to do. And so once we wrote that book, and Mark Hyman wrote it with me, we went to see the top guys at NIH. And when we were in the meeting, and Lynn Redwood, who runs my organization, CHE, had met with these people for years and years. She was like the pioneer of all this stuff. She was a public health official in Georgia. She gave tens of thousands, she was a nurse practitioner, she got tens of thousands of vaccines. And her child got autism from a vaccine, a aerosol vaccine, and she put it all together. And she started to say fines and, became an advisor to the Pentagon and everything. But she was in this meeting with us. And in the meeting, we said, look, why did you leave it in the flu vaccine? You took it out of all the pediatric vaccines in 2003. Why did you put it into the flu vaccine that same year and mandate the flu vaccine for pregnant women and for children, from 6 months and once every year? And by the way, you don't need to do it because there's a bunch of companies that are making aerosol-free flu shots. Oh, you don't need it. You just need to make single-dose shots. And they said, this is what they said in the meeting, well, it's not really there as a preservative, it's there as an adjuvant. So, and Lynn whispered to me, that's illegal. Because you can't, I got 1 minute left. But let me get to the point. There are 4 companies in this country and make all 72 vaccines that are mandated to our children. And all 4 of them are serial felons. These are the companies that created the opioid epidemic and kills as many kids every year as died in the 20-year Vietnam War. Wow. 56,000 kids last year. Those 4 companies in the last 10 years have been convicted or made settlements to felony charges and paid $35 billion in damages collectively and penalties for falsifying science, for lying to regulators, for deceiving doctors, for blackmailing, bribing, for killing hundreds of thousands of people. Vioxx killed 500,000 people. It was on a headache pill that Merck knew was going to cause heart attacks and didn't tell anybody. And they knew how many it was going to kill, and they said, we're still going to make more money on it, so we're going to market it. This is Merck. Now, how is it that the Democratic politicians in this country can say, yes, these are homicidal companies. They lie, they cheat, they falsify science, they do it with every product they have except vaccines.